What ifs have hit chapter 27, and they're getting more and more creative, as evidenced by this first what if tonight. Not quite sure what level of boldness this would be, but Dylan said, what if a team not named LSU or Alabama or Texas A&M wins the SEC West? Well, it would be an earthquake in the SEC. It would be an earthquake in the college football playoff picture. We are, of course, left with either Ole Miss, Auburn, Arkansas, or Mississippi State winning the division. That means one of those teams play in Atlanta. Auburn's played there recently. Obviously, none of the others have been there recently. So, number one, I think about who's waiting for them in Atlanta. Probably Georgia. And you would probably suggest that that means someone's being served up to them. Again, that's all probably, because that's what August is about. Who would you think it is, though? Just for fun. Would you think it's Auburn? Would you think Ole Miss just struck lightning in a bottle or found lightning in a bottle over there in Oxford? You know my proclivity for loving Arkansas. Love them. But I felt a little Mississippi State energy on this. Mississippi State is the one that gets LSU and Bama at home. They don't play Georgia in the regular season. They get Ole Miss at home at the end of the year. And really nothing is known about them, which is ridiculous because you should know everything you need to know about them. And I'm speaking as the future college football commissioner who tries to know all about every team. I'm saying the public is out to lunch on Mississippi State. It's one of the most underrated teams in the country. I'm going to talk to you about them later in the show. No one knows anything about them. And like 18 or 19 of their returning starters are going to be seniors this year. It's wild. Also, you got like a 15 million yard career passer who's returning at quarterback. And people are like, oh, Mississippi State, kind of enigmatic. Don't know much about them. They'd probably be the one that pulled this off if someone pulled this off. It's a stretch. I'll grant you that. But if someone did it, maybe it's Zach Arnett. Oh, by the way, that's the story of the year. If Zach Arnett takes them to Atlanta, you know, we saw Brian Kelly do it out of nowhere last year. Maybe it's Arnett's turn. Next up, this one gets a little spicy. Braden said, what if Florida State trounces both Miami and Florida in November? Point spread alert. We got them for you. FSU is minus 15 at home against Miami. That's in week 11. So over a 2-touchdown favorite. In week 13, they are favored by 9 on the road against Florida. Those are current lines. You could bet money on those right now if you wanted to. Not quite Ramen Noodle Express material yet. We'll see. What does trounce mean? Is it 2 touchdowns? Well, if it is, you just pushed basically against Miami. Like, that's not out of the realm of possibility at all. And you covered, but even not significantly, against Florida. FSU is favored pretty much to do this. So if they do it, I guess they lived up to expectation. That's the funny thing about expectation. All of a sudden you have to live up to it when it's higher. The second thing would be, imagine recruiting. Imagine what they're saying in recruiting. Imagine Mike Norvell and his staff being able to go into living rooms and say, hey, everything else they sell you is irrelevant. We're selling you results. Look what we just did. And it's not going to stop. And whether they're right about that or not, they would have earned the right to preach that in living rooms. They would probably also, let's just be real about this, they would also trigger a massive spike in donations. Their NIL fund down there would massively benefit because of this. So it would all be trending up for Florida State. And then you also have to ask the very, very here and now question of, well, if they trounced both of them, was it en route to going undefeated in the regular season? Like, did they also do it to Clemson? Whomst else did they trounce? So that could be fun times. Not in Gainesville or Coral Gables necessarily, but that could be fun times. Next up, let's go to the Big Ten. Marshall said, what if Wisconsin upsets Ohio State and wins the Big Ten West? Well, Luke Fickell's stock would go through the roof. I would argue it should already be there, but it would validate his vision. They're doing a lot of things different at Wisconsin this year. Some, like myself, think it'll pay off and pay off pretty big time. I don't know about year one, but they took steps to try and immediately win. They took steps in the transfer portal, namely at quarterback, to try and immediately win. So when does this game happen, this little Ohio State-Wisconsin tilt? Well, it happens, what week is it, Jesse? Colin, you don't have to put the schedule up. Week 9. Okay, so it's a little bit later in the year. I think it's Ohio State's toughest road game, at least in conference. They have to go to Notre Dame, too. The line's 9.5 on this game right now. You could also bet that right now. Ohio State minus 9.5. It would be a great sign for the Big Ten. It would also be history, because this is the last year of divisions up there. And if Wisconsin wins, if they go on, let's just say to win the conference, the Big Ten West would break an 0-for streak. They are 0-9. The Big Ten West is 0-9 in the conference title game. They never won one. So, how fitting would that be? And also, what kind of mess, what kind of blender would this throw Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State into if Wisconsin just goes on? I know you just said win division. I'm having fun with it. What if they win the whole conference? And lastly, what about Washington? I'm talking Washington a little bit later in the show, too, so you want to stick around for that. But in the meantime, Brooks said, what if Washington wins the Pac-12? Well, they've got the number 2 odds to win the Pac-12, and that's recent. They overtook Oregon in the odds market. Does someone know something? I don't know. It wasn't me. I didn't bet on him yet. So this means Michael Penix shined. This means Michael Penix changed his life forever. I mean, he's about to make life-changing money, and he was not on a path to do that 2 years ago by this point at Indiana. They will also, Washington, they may also become the only Pac-12 team to make the playoff twice. And then they'll, speaking of 2, just keep holding those 2 fingers up, but then all of a sudden it's deuces to the Pac-12. We gone. We're headed to the Big Ten. So it would be like one of the most cruel or appropriate curtains to drop on the chapter of college football that was the Pac-12, depending on your perspective.